Next Steps Forward is focused on resiliency, leadership, personal empowerment, and well-being. I don't know what we could find someone who personifies and epitomizes all those qualities more than today's guest, Breanna Cole. Breanna is an outreach advocate at Selah Freedom, a faith-based nonprofit anti-human trafficking organization based in Florida in the Midwest, with the mission to end sex trafficking and bring freedom to the exploited through 5 strong programs: awareness, prevention, outreach, residential, and organizational consulting. Breanna works closely with the Florida State Attorney's Office and the Office of Regional Counsel through a court diversion program. She's also a human trafficking survivor. Breanna Cole, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm really grateful for, you being so open to share just how bad this issue is in our communities.
No, we appreciate your time and certainly your bravery in sharing your story with us. And Breanna, I want to say for our audience at the top of today's podcast, that you and I had a conversation a few weeks ago, and that, as I would with any victim of human trafficking, I have the utmost admiration and respect for you. You've been extremely open and very detailed about your experience because you want others to understand how the same thing could happen to them. You've been willing to answer any questions, but I just want to let everyone know that should there be a question that you don't want to answer or think is inappropriate, that you'll make that very clear to me.
Yes.
So just as you did a few weeks ago when we first spoke, I'd like to open today by having you share your story. It's very involved, very shocking, and it could happen to so many people, and it does happen to so many, many young people every day. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and take as long as you'd like, please.
Thank you, Chris. So I'll start from the beginning. I'm born and raised here in Florida. I grew up in a broken home. The first traumatic experience I remember as a child was when my dad left. He was an alcoholic as well as an addict, but I was a daddy's girl through and through. He was my everything. And even though, he struggled with substances, like, he was my best friend. So when he left, I was devastated. And my mom, she did the best that she could, that she knew how. She struggled with mental health issues, anxiety, depression. And, now that I'm in recovery and have had some healing, I understand that, she's been through a lot. So after my dad left, she wasn't able to be there emotionally for my sister and I. And so I sought out attention any way that I could, whether it was, bad attention, because in my eyes, that was better than no attention at all. Getting in trouble in school and, just dealing with, the trauma of my dad not being around. When he left, he stayed gone until I was 12. I hadn't seen him, talked to him. I think part of it was my mom keeping us from him to try to protect us. But of course, as a child, like, you're not able to comprehend that, or I wasn't able to comprehend that. So like, I was mad at my mom. I thought that, she hates my dad, so she doesn't want us to be around him, obviously having no idea what addiction was or anything like that. So into my teenage years, that attention-seeking behavior, progressed. I started hanging out with the rough crowd and, just trying to escape my reality, even from a young age. The first time I ever tried a substance, I was 12. Hanging out with my middle school friends, and just, as soon as I realized, oh man, I don't have to feel the way that I've been feeling, I can just escape into this substance, I was off to the races. So when I was 13, my best friend introduced me to her cousin. He was a 15-year-old high school dropout, pothead addict. But I fell in love. I thought that he was my happily ever after. Of course, my mom didn't approve of any relationship because I was young. But I would sneak and see him behind her back, sneak out of the house, just hang out with him and smoke weed. And When I was in ninth grade, I got expelled from school for smoking weed on campus. So I went to an alternative school for, for kids that are troubled and drop out or get kicked out. And they drug test you at that school. So my boyfriend, he introduced me to opiates. He was living with his best friend's mom, who had like a accident at work. So she was prescribed like a plethora of different opiate medications, and she would just give him handfuls of them all the time. And the first time I ever tried it, I fell in love. Again, like, constantly seeking to escape my reality and the way that I was feeling inside. I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like who I was, and, wanted to do anything that could escape from that. So I kept using, and I stayed with this boyfriend throughout high school. I ended up, I think I was either just about to turn 18 or just turn 18. My mom was trying to wake me up for school my senior year. And I was like, I don't want to go to school. I probably hung over from the night before. And she was like, you need to get up or get out. And I was like, fine, bye. And like took that as an opportunity to leave the home. And I moved in with that boyfriend and, continued to use. Then we were staying with his uncle, and he informed us that he was moving out of the house and that we needed to find somewhere to go. And that was the first time that we both became homeless. I did manage to graduate high school by the grace of God. I really don't know how I managed that one, but I did. And my using got progressively worse. Like I started trying harder substances. 15, 16 was the first time I tried meth. Just off the wall craziness for such a young age, trying to feel different than I felt. Dad was in and out of my life. So I was 18, graduated high school. The boyfriend became super abusive mentally and physically. We would be in knockdown, drag out fist fights in the street over drugs. And when I was 18, I learned that I could use my body to get drugs. And he knew that. And I was introduced by a friend of mine. Well, obviously she wasn't a friend, but she, had a drug dealer, like family member, and, she wanted to make money. So she was like, hey, I have my uncle that will give you drugs if you sleep with him. I was like, okay, whatever. And so my first, I experienced my first piece of exploitation. My boyfriend at the time would be like, if you love me, you'll do this. Like, because he was in the grips of drug addiction. And, that's when we're in our active addiction, like we get our drugs by any means. So I finally got away from him because I was tired of being homeless and being abused. I was like, if it'd be different, I told myself like it'd be different if we were homeless and he was treating me like a human being, but he wasn't. He was treating me like garbage and super abusive. So I contacted my dad and I actually moved in with him. And I was so happy. I didn't care that my dad was using, we were using together, and I was happy because I was with him, as sick as that sounds. And so get away from the boyfriend, I'm living with my dad, still using, hardcore using. My dad ended up getting arrested because he had a warrant out of Michigan And I remember him telling me, like, when I lived with him, like, if I get arrested, we lose everything. And so, like, neighbor friend of where we were living at called me and was like, your dad got arrested. He's going to be extradited back to Michigan. And I was just like, oh no, what am I going to do? And my mom, of all people, actually bonded him out. And so my dad ended up moving to Michigan, and he offered to let me go with him. I was like, but my friends are here. Like, I don't want to do that. No way. It's cold. Ew, no. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to move up there, and if you change your mind, you let me know. I'm like, okay. So fast forward a few months, I found out I was pregnant. And I was terrified. I was like, I can't have a kid. I'm a teenager, essentially. And I was actually sexually assaulted by my step grandpa. He knew that I was on drugs. Like he essentially helped raise me. So he married my grandmother when my mom was 15. So he's been a part of my life always. He helped me learn how to walk. He was that father figure when I didn't have one. And so he got a hold of me one day and he was like, hey, if you get me some girls, I'll pay you. And I was like, haha, you're crazy. That's insane. He was like, no, I'm serious. So, he took advantage of the fact that I was under the influence and in the grips of addiction. And he was like, he lives in Clearwater area. So he was like, I'll get a hotel room. I'll hang out with the girl and then you can hang with me and we'll go get dinner. I'll take you shopping. You can even stay at the hotel. We can go in the pool, whatever. All sounded great. Well, when I had gone there, I'd been up for a while. And so I crashed. And, when I crashed, and you could like shake me violently and I would not wake up. I woke up the next morning and I didn't feel right. I knew something bad had happened, but I just, chose to stuff it down, and leave and go use so that I didn't have to feel what I was feeling and could just be in denial about it. So again, I found out I was pregnant and I thought that it was from that situation. So I went to get an abortion. And I was sitting in Planned Parenthood lobby, terrified, crying. And I think that's the first time I ever heard God talk to me. It was clear as day. He said, don't do this. It's going to be okay. And that's when I just lost it. I became hysterical. I just cried. I probably looked crazy in this lobby. So like I mustered up the courage and walked to the front desk and I told the lady, I was like, I can't do this. She was like, okay, do you want some prenatals? I was like, yeah. And so she, wrote me a prescription for some prenatals and I went out front and first person I called was my dad. I was like, hey, so does that offer still stand? Can I come live with you in Michigan? He was like, oh yeah, absolutely. It's like, I'm pregnant. And he was like, okay, come on. So I moved up there to get away from the drugs. My dad, he said he wasn't using, and I believed him. And I got up there and he was still using. It wasn't quite that bad yet. But as the months progressed, and I got more pregnant, he continued to use more and more, and it was very bad. And so we lived with his girlfriend and her 3 kids. And there was one day he was so under the influence, like he couldn't even like walk. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go. I don't have a driver's license, but I have to go pick up these kids from school. His girlfriend doesn't know how to drive. So I took his car keys and drove in the semi-snowy road to go pick up these kids. And at that moment, I was like, I have to leave. I cannot do this. I cannot be here. I can't bring a kid into this. And he's going to die. I knew he was going to die. I reached out to my family members. I'm like, because one of my second cousins was actually the one selling him drugs. I tried to talk to her and tell her, like, look, you need to stop. You're going to kill my dad. And I tried to have like a mini intervention, but it didn't work. So I told myself that it would be best to leave and, stop communication with him. I told myself that, maybe it will hurt less when he dies. So I called my mom and, I had been like updating her throughout my stay in Michigan, like, oh man, it's getting bad, so she knew what was going on. And I called her and I was like, I'm afraid to ask, but I feel like I have another choice. Is there any way that, I could move back and stay with you for a little bit until I figure out somewhere to go? And she was like, oh, honey, I've already decided. Like, I knew this was coming, and you can come and live with me, and you don't have to put a time limit on it. Like, you can live with me. And so 8 months pregnant, I packed my bags and went to the airport and came back to Florida. I cut off all communication with my dad. There was a bit of a resentment there. Looking back on it, like, I've struggled with guilt for that, because like, who was I to judge him? I'm an addict myself. So I did pretty good. I did use a couple times when I was pregnant, but that's it. I'm not proud of that, but I wasn't using the entire time. And so my daughter was born, and I stayed clean for about 7 months, I think, and started using again. I wasn't working any sort of program of recovery. I was just, simply staying abstinent. So I relapsed. And so before I got pregnant, like, I could use opiates, and I wouldn't be like physically dependent on them. It was more mental. Like, I didn't get withdrawal or, the physical sickness from, not having opiates. But after I had her, when I relapsed, I became instantly sick the next day. And that started the vicious cycle over again. So using got progressively worse. And my daughter was almost 2. We were living with my mom, and a friend of mine, kid, was just like fresh out of jail, wannabe drug dealer, full-blown drug addict, just like me. And I'm like, oh, he's kind of cute. And, so broken inside. And, of course, I had to make him my boyfriend. So DCF got involved. They came and they told me that either you leave this house or we are taking your daughter into foster care. And I was like, nope, no way. Nope. There's no way I'm letting that happen. So I left. And that's when my boyfriend introduced me to IV drug use. My entire using career, I had always been super against IV drug use. I hated it. I thought it was disgusting. Anytime I found out someone was doing it, I just lost respect for them. I was it was one of those things that I said I was never going to do. Being so hopeless and, getting kicked out of my home, situation with my daughter, I was like, you know what, whatever, like, I don't have anything to lose. Why not? And I think in retrospect, I think that was all part of his plan. Because so we were at a mutual friend's hotel room, and I guess she talked to him, and he came to me and he was like, you can start working, like you can sleep with these guys and I can get a bunch of dope and sell it and we won't be homeless. And, I wasn't a stranger to selling my body. I'd done it before. So, I didn't want to do it, but I also didn't want to be homeless again. I remembered sleeping behind a gas station at 18 years old, homeless. I didn't want to do that again. So I said, okay. And started selling myself. He would post the ads, and he started getting extremely physically abusive. I didn't want to do it anymore, and by this time I didn't have a choice. Yes, we weren't technically homeless, but we were homeless. We were in and out of hotels, and he would beat me up so bad that the hotel manager would kick us out. Not ask if I'm okay or if I need help or anything like that. I have bruises and red marks all over me, and they're like, you have to go. You can't be here. So I just kept using more and more and more. To try to hide that trauma, and, I didn't have any hope. I thought that I told myself, like, you deserve this. Like, you chose drugs over your daughter. You deserve this. And, so I stayed, and, the drugs, I thought that the drugs were like helping me through it. It was masking. It was just masking. So I finally got away from him. He ended up actually trading me to a drug dealer for drugs. I don't know if he was withdrawing or just desperate, but he traded me. And I was staying with this drug dealer, and I think he was pretty delusional. I think he thought that I was going to, be his girlfriend or something like that. And, I had just done a bunch of drugs, and he was like, all right, we're going to bed. And I was like, no, I'm not going to bed. So he kicked me out. Should I stop there? Because it says 3 minutes till break.
No, we're going to skip the break.
Oh, okay.
Keep on going, and we'll leave this in too.
Okay. So it's like 3:00 in the morning, and I'm sitting out front of this hotel room, like not knowing what my next steps are. I'm just sitting there, and a girl about my age comes, stumbling up to me. She was pretty drunk at the time, and she asked me for a cigarette, and we were just talking, and I just explained my situation. Didn't share with her that I just escaped my boyfriend trafficker, but just told her, I don't know where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do. And then another guy and female walk up, and she tells them, like, hey, she doesn't know where she's going to go. Like, maybe she could stay with us. And the guy was like, yeah, we have 2 rooms. You can stay with us. That's not a problem. And I had that gut check. I was like, this can't be good. This just can't be good. The guy was like super flashy, and the girls were like dressed skimpy. So I'm like, this is not a good situation. But again, I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to have to be outside for the next however long. So I said, okay. I ignored that red flag and, went with them. Turns out this guy was trafficking them. They were from Atlanta, and they had 2 rooms at that same hotel. And the girl that he walked up with was his main girl, which is what a lot of people call a bottom, who, helps recruit other women, and, it's just his main girl. So I stayed in the room with him and his bottom, and the original girl was in the other room. We didn't know this, but the original girl, had been in contact with her mom, and her mom knew that she was being trafficked and actually filed a missing persons report, and knew she was in Sarasota. So we overslept past checkout. And the girl comes knocking on the door and says, "The cops are coming." And the trafficker lost his mind. He was so mad. He was like, "Oh, you get in the car right now." And by this time, I'm starting to feel dope sick because, I hadn't had drugs since the night before. And I just get in the car because what else am I going to do? And I get in the car and I pass out, and I woke up, and we were almost to Miami. And I lost my mind. I was like, "Are you crazy? I can't go to Miami. You need to take me back right now." And he was like, he kind of just had this sinister smirk on his face. And he was just like, "What did you think, you were going to stay with us for free? No, we're going to put you to work." And, I kind of I had no choice but to kind of accept that. I didn't know these people. I didn't know him or what he was capable of. I could tell that, the females were afraid of him. And, so we stayed in Miami for a few days, and, we come back up to Sarasota. This was around July 4th. And, he was originally saying that, "Oh no, we're going to go to St. Pete or Clearwater. We're going to stay up there. There's a lot of money up there." And I was like, "No, no, no, let's go to Sarasota. I know people there." And, kind of trying to plan an escape route. So I guess they had been in contact with another female, and they were setting it up to go and pick her up, to bring her, so that he had 3 of us. But what they didn't know is it was really the law enforcement that they were communicating with. And she was a minor. The girl was a minor. So she went to the hospital and, said, "Hey, look, there's this guy. He's trafficking women. He's very abusive physically, and he needs to be stopped." So we get to the hotel in Sarasota, and me and the original girl stayed at the hotel while the trafficker and his bottom went to go pick up the minor. And so when they went to pick her up, the police were there and arrested them. And, you'd think that my first response would be like, "Oh man, I need to get out of here, get away from these people." Right. But once they left, I was like, "Nope, I have to get drugs. That's what I have to do." And so I invited one of my drug dealer friends over, and we were on the second story of the hotel, and we were getting ready to walk to the gas station next door, and the door was open because we were about to leave. And this guy wearing khaki pants and a button-up shirt, a nice haircut, clean shaven, walks past and looks in the room. And we just stop in our tracks, and we're like, "Did you just see that? What was that? That was sketchy." A couple, it felt like forever, but it was probably only a minute later. He walks back, and then he walks in the room, and he says, "Are you so-and-so?" To the girl. And she said, "Yes." And we're both terrified. We're thinking we're going to jail. And he looks at both of us and he says, "We have Sway in custody. You're safe." And we both started crying. I still wasn't convinced that I wasn't going to jail. I'd never been in this type of situation before. And then more and more cops keep showing up, and like I'm starting to freak out. I have drugs in my pocket. And I guess so before the law enforcement came, they reached out to Selah Freedom and said, hey, we have this this guy who's trafficking women. We just taken him into custody. We're thinking there might be more than one victim. Will you come to the scene? And her name is Misty. She came to the scene, and she was so gracious. And, she asked both of us, hey, would you mind, coming to the police department and, answering some questions? And I was like, oh no, we are not going to the police department. No way. Kind of like putting on this facade that I wasn't scared, when in reality I was terrified. She was so sweet, and she was like, okay, well, how about we go to my office? And I was like, okay, but first I need cigarettes or I'm not going. And she was like, okay, that's fine. And, we went to the gas station. She bought me a pack of cigarettes, and we went to her office. And, I don't really remember too much from, what we were talking about. I know that she was offering us both services and saying, like, you don't have to live this way anymore. We have a way out. Like, we have a program if you're willing to, do the work. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face my trauma. I wasn't ready to stop using. The girl, the original girl, she said yes and came into the program that night. Like I said, I wasn't ready. So, she was still so graceful and was like, okay, didn't try to push anything on me or force anything on me. And, the girl that was also there, she ended up, having a seizure. I've never seen anything like that before, and I was terrified. So we ended up going to the hospital, and I went to the bathroom and actually like passed out because I was so under the influence, and they ended up leaving. And I called Misty and I was like, where'd you go? Like, I'm still here at the hospital. I fell asleep in the bathroom. And so she contacted law enforcement and was like, hey, this girl's still at the hospital. You need to Marchman Act her. She's going to like end up killing herself. So it took me, I want to say like a year and a half, to finally become ready. And, in that year and a half, like Misty would randomly show up in my life. And like, whether it was like, I ended up going to jail for something unrelated. And they had called like, do we have any volunteers to join Selah Freedom group? And I was like, I wonder if Misty's there. I mean, I had already like paid my bond and was just waiting to get formally released and stuff. But I went to group, and she was just staring at me like she couldn't quite figure out where she knew me from. And I was like, you know me. And I was like, it's Breanna. And she was like, oh my God, I saw someone driving today and I swear I thought it was you. I was like, no, I wasn't here. And she was like, well, so are you ready for some help? And I'm like, oh, I'm actually bonding out. So no thanks. And she's like, okay, well, let me know. We'll be here. And I continued to use a lot, like more than I had ever used before. And then now it was IV use. So, that did a lot of damage to my body. I ended up in the hospital with an abscess on the tip of my finger from IV drug use. And it was extremely infected. And, they told the hospital, I got admitted to the hospital, and the doctor came and told me, she was like, you can either stay here on 7 weeks or for 7 weeks on IV antibiotics with a chance that you still might not save your finger, or we can amputate it, because the infection had got down to the bone. It was just the very tip of my middle finger, like that first knuckle. I was like, can I think about it? It's kind of a big decision. And she was like, yeah, of course. And so I was like, you know what? Just take it off. I can't be here for 7 weeks. I can't be here alone with my thoughts for that long. I can't. So I had the tip of my finger removed, and I was on the care unit at the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, where, it's for people with drug related illnesses. And, there's a camera and an alarm on the bed, and, it's pretty high security. Somehow managed to get someone to bring me drugs and a syringe. And I got caught trying to, prepare it. The nurse was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, nothing. And, she took the blanket off the bed and the syringe fell on the floor, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Give it back." Thinking that she might actually give it back to me. She was like, "No, I can't do that." It's like, "Okay, then I'm leaving." And she was like, "You just had a piece of your body removed. You can't leave." And I was like, "Yeah, I can. I'm leaving." And I left and continued to use. And I would say probably a week goes by, and my hand starts swelling. I was too afraid to take off the bandage. I was like, I'm pretty sure there's stitches, but I'm afraid to take it off. And it was just craziness. Like the logic of someone or the lack of logic of someone who's using. It blows my mind today. Anyway, so the infection actually spread to my blood, and it was really bad. I ended up getting admitted to the hospital, and I ended up in total over 40 days at the hospital fighting this infection. But I kept leaving against medical advice because, again, alone with my thoughts, alone with the trauma, not having any sort of healing. But Selah showed up. They showed up. They brought me an Easter basket full of candy, like a NA book, and just like, who are these people? And like, what do they want from me? I still had that kind of street mentality, on top of like the trauma of, losing people's trust. And, I wasn't sure that they didn't want anything from me yet, but they kept showing up. And, so I had emergency surgery on I had emergency surgery on my hand, in January of 2017. While I was getting that emergency surgery, my dad passed away of an overdose. I didn't know until like the next day or so when, because when the surgeon was preparing me to go into surgery, he was like, "Is there anyone that I can call to let them know like that you're okay after surgery?" And I just said, "No, there's no one. No one cares about me. My mom's disowned me. Like my sister hates me. There's nobody." He's like, "Really? There's nobody that I can call?" And I was like, "Well, I guess you can call my mom." And that's the only way she knew I was at the hospital. And that's when she came and told me that my dad had passed away. And it was really hard for me. I had a warrant while I was in the hospital and ended up going straight from the hospital to jail. And, so I wasn't really able to process or grieve the death of my dad. It was really hard for me, especially because like I knew that it was happening. And like, like I had said earlier, like I thought that cutting off contact would make it easier when he passed away. And boy, was I wrong. It was hard. So, I ended up going to jail one last time in May of 2017. I had court. It was like 2:00 in the morning. And I had court at like 8 a.m. that day. And I was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to jail. I have a warrant. So I'm going to go try to get some drugs, because who wants to go to court sober? Not me. Knew I was going to jail. So, but like it was like Jekyll and Hyde. Like part of me knew that I needed help and wanted it, but the other part of me like could not stop using. I couldn't. So I was with my friend, and we ended up getting pulled over. And for a split second, I was like, oh man, I have this other girl's ID in my wallet. I should just, she kind of looks like me. I should just give him this fake ID. And, because I knew I had a warrant. I was like, no, you need this. You need to get help. And I just gave him my real ID, and, they ended up taking me to jail in Sarasota. My court date was in Manatee. So I went to Sarasota County Jail, and I was out on bond for a different charge. And so the next morning, my bail bondswoman picked me up from jail, and she was like, I'm taking you to Manatee County Jail to surrender you, because, that's how it works with bond and stuff like that. And it was really cool because she was a recovering addict, and, she spoke into me and, said, like, this isn't the life that you want. You were made for more. And so she took me to Manatee County Jail, and I went to first appearance, I think either that day or the next day. And they were like, Miss Cole, you're here because you didn't show up to court on May 10th. And I was like, Your Honor, I didn't show up to court because I was in jail in Sarasota County. And he was like, okay, supervised release, and hits the gavel. And I was like, oh, heck yeah, I'm getting out. I'm getting out of jail. This is awesome. Again, Jekyll and Hyde, because half of me like really wants this and really wants to change and get help. But then the other half is like being taken over by my addiction. So I went back to medical. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take a nap. And, by the time I wake up, they'll be telling me to roll it up. It's time to go. Well, I woke up like 6 hours later, and I was like, why am I still here? Turns out I still had bond on another charge. So I went to general population, and better believe my addiction had me on that phone trying to get someone to pay my bond to get me out, knowing that I need help and want help, still trying to use. And then God stepped in once again. I ended up getting into like an argument with one of my cellmates, and I ended up getting sent to lock, which is jail inside jail. And they sent me to like they called it DR court, disciplinary review court, because of the altercation that I got in. And they were like, okay, well, we're sentencing you to 22 days in lock. And, if you know anything about lock, no outside contact, no phone calls, no visits. You're lucky if you get to go outside once a week, only showered 3 times a week, I think. It was terrible. But on the 21st day of that 22-day sentence, I went to court and signed for the Selah Freedom program. And, I was scared. I was scared to take that leap and, go into the unknown and to face my trauma. But you know what? I was like, I cannot have my daughter feel how I felt growing up, or feel how I felt when my dad died of an overdose. Like I cannot let that be my story or her story. And I surrendered. I went into the Selah Freedom program through the Tyler Court Diversion program. It took me 15 months to graduate. I was I'm still a little stubborn and hard-headed. So I didn't, it wasn't easy for me. But I did it. I graduated the program, through the program, received very intensive trauma therapy. They call it trauma resolution treatment, with Dr. Quintal and Associates. I basically learned how to live because I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was using and trauma. And that was the best decision I've ever made. I'm sitting here today alive because of the grace from God and the opportunities from Selah Freedom. 2 months after I graduated, I got hired on staff I knew going, like, you know, when I was going through the program, I was like, I have to do what Misty does. I have to be that person for people. Like I have to, that's my goal. That's what God is calling me to do. And that's what I do now. I find these women, I don't give up on them. I remember Misty telling me, like, let me love you until you learn to love yourself. And that's exactly what Selah Freedom did for me. And now I love myself. I have a relationship with my daughter. I have a relationship with my mom and my sister. And I help women that went through the same thing or are currently going through the same things that I've been through. And it's just incredible. And I have a life today that I could have never imagined possible.
Wow. That's all I can say. Breanna, thank you for sharing your extraordinary and harrowing story of what you've done, and congratulations to what you're doing now. I guess the one question I have for you, what advice would you give to someone who suspects that they or someone they know may be a victim of human trafficking?
Reach out. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline or the Selah Freedom Hotline. Gain awareness on the different signs of trafficking, because it can look different. And, a lot of people, when they think of human trafficking, they think of the movie Taken. And yes, like it does happen that way in other countries, but it can look very different for different people. So like educating yourself on the different signs and, reaching out, it'll save someone's life.
Breanna Cole, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And if you suspect someone is being trafficked, please call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888. Again, that's 888-373-7888, or call the Selah Freedom Hotline, 888-837-3363. And the website is selahfreedom.com. That's SELAH freedom.com. I'm Chris Meek. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.